Welcome back to the new episode of Next Marketing with AJ, as in me. Today, I have the privilege to welcome one of the most incredible talents in advertising and media. It's interesting to see the growth and evolution of digital engagement in the outside US markets, and our guest today, Richard, is one of the pioneers in that field. In this episode today, we'll be talking about usage of various conventional and new media channels that can work together to power meaningful HCP experiences in a regulatory compliant manner, which is most important when we look at an outside US market. I'm very excited to bring this episode to you today.
Hi, Richard. Welcome to the show. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Watched all the episodes so far, so I'm really honored to be invited here. So thank you. My name is Rich Springham. I'm the managing director of an agency called Initiative Health. And Initiative Health is part of the IPG group. And what we do is we do a lot of work with pharma clients on a global and local scale within media, but then also we offer other services as well. So great to be on your show. Thank you.
So IPG is close to my heart. I spent 7 years at IPG. So welcome again. A very warm welcome to you to the show.
Yeah, thank you.
So today's topic is kind of very interesting and something which comes up, I think, in our daily professional lives, talking to our customers as well, is media landscape, and especially focused around the out of US markets or regulated markets as well. So let's start from the beginning, right? So how would you like to define this landscape? And we'll try to focus this on its healthcare professional media, but that's what is the dominant media in these markets anyways.
Yeah, I think it's a super interesting marketplace that it has many different regulations across the landscape. That's really what I've lived and breathed in my career, going from publisher side through to media agency side. Sometimes it can be a little bit scary for people to try and navigate different regulations in different markets. But I love the challenge, and I think it's a brilliant marketplace in which to work. And you can see how it's changed over the last number of years, and also some of the exciting things that we're doing in the marketplace at the minute. So I think it's a brilliant marketplace, and healthcare professionals are human beings just like you and I, Harshit. And how we communicate to them through the media of media will continue to evolve just like we consume our media today.
So what all do you include in this landscape? Right? So when I talk to pharma marketeers, they often include email as part of this, even sending text messages or WhatsApp messages. Sometimes people include their CRM platforms like Viva as part of this landscape. Right? And also advertising and engagement on medical journal platforms as well. Right? Are there any additional things that you include as part of this media landscape for healthcare professional engagement?
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the things that's changed most is the breadth of platforms that you can engage healthcare professionals on in these regulated out of US markets. 3 years ago, maybe even slightly longer, there was so much literature about the use of social media for compliant HCP comms. And now because we've got to figure that out as a market, as an industry, there's less commentary on that. So social is a really key marketplace. So your X, you have Meta, and even through to TikTok. And actually you can see a real rise at the minute in HCP influencers on platforms like TikTok and YouTube. So that's a really big market for us, is the social media platforms. But then also you do have these almost peer-to-peer HCP social platforms as well. They're really important. So they're a big part of what we do for clients. And then actually I do think that you have these big global platforms that have consolidated some of the local partners under one house. But then I do think that the local platforms are really up their game in the last few years. they've developed technologically, they've developed in their audience management, they've developed in their performance reporting. So we as an agency work really hard with clients to get that balance across all those different options. And like you alluded to at the start, not only is there a huge amount of choice for a pharma marketeer across those options that you outlined, but even within the media space, there's a huge amount of options within that space. But as I said right at the start, I love it, and I think it's an amazing marketplace to be a part of.
So I can see the list growing, which is amazing. So it's great how the landscape is growing. I want to deep dive, double click on the social, because I know a lot of marketeers are very keen on social in various markets. Can I do, it's regulated, not regulated? What if a consumer sees? You want to double click on that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. And one of the, obviously, as I'm sure many people will be watching this know, one of the key things is about what you communicate. So healthcare professionals, prescription messaging, disease awareness messaging, corporate messaging. And that is really the key about whether things are compliant or not in your market. And even platforms that do have a global span, like a Meta or Instagram, Facebook, etc., even those, you need to be able to understand the local regulations when communicating to healthcare professionals in those markets. But then even deeper than that, you look at regional platforms, like APAC has its own kind of microcosm of platforms in a region, and then you have more locally nuanced social platforms as well, I think Latin America. So there is a lot of nuance in social as an understanding of the phrase, but any one of those, I believe, can do some really creative work with those platforms communicating to healthcare professionals. And something we'll say from the other way is that healthcare professionals, as there's been multiple amounts of literature about, are becoming much more digitally native, growing up with screens in front of them, and grown up on social media. And what we're finding is there's a lot more content coming out from healthcare professionals, whether to their peers or to patients. So this is where the rise of these HCP influencers are coming from. There was a report from Pharma recently saying there's 1.5 million HCP influencers across social. And actually the social platforms, just to take this one step further, the social platforms are starting to recognize that and really try and provide a service to users. So YouTube, for example, in their recent credentialing and verification of healthcare professionals, I think it's a really great step forward. So not only will it allow certified HCPs to be able to communicate to an audience, whoever that audience is, in a trusted way, but also those users can understand, yes, we're hearing it from a credible source, because as we know, there's a lot of either fake news or misinformation online. So it's a really nuanced space, but it's great that it's coming from both sides, both social platforms development and the HCP content coming out.
Yeah. And it shows, I think, the interest of these large consumer platforms to help pharmaceutical companies to engage with their most important stakeholder, right? Now, that kind of takes me to, where do you see this evolving? Do you see this landscape even becoming bigger and complicated, or do you see that becoming even more targeted?
Yeah, and I think the media marketplace, if we zoom out from social, the media marketplace is very complicated with a number of really great platforms doing a number of really great things. And one of the things that we have to do as an agency is to be able to distill that, to understand what the client's objectives are, to understand who their audience are, to understand how they behave, where they are, how to communicate to them. So it can be quite daunting. And one of the good trends that I've seen in pharma over the last few years is that pharma companies are starting to invest into people that understand the media space in order that they can support the increasing maturity from the pharma company in the US market. So that's great. I think that investment should continue. It's quite a broad industry. And what we're seeing is that, yes, there's a multifaceted community of HCP platforms, the simplicity is going to be able to drive action from a platform selection perspective. And we can see, obviously, programmatic is becoming much more of an option within the endemic space, which is fantastic. And actually, that then allows another trend is that then allows us to better understand those healthcare professional audiences within a media setting. Because if we rewind 3 to 5 years ago, there's just a small handful of data and information to help us make decisions about where we're going to put our media pounds, media dollars. And what's happened over the last few years, and is helping that moving forward, is there's much more of a focus on understanding your audience first, and understanding how your audience behave in a media setting, and understand therefore how to communicate to that audience in a particular media setting. One of the great things is that yes, we've got tech partners, data partners, and platforms that are trying to use that drive into HTTP insights, but do it in a simple way, because otherwise it's just become overwhelming for pharma marketeers. And again, one of the skills in agencies, one of the skills in platforms, one of the skills in pharma marketers is to try and drill down into that targeting, but don't overcomplicate things that becomes unwieldy, or you're not able to keep an eye on what your actual objective is.
Is the impact of all this messaging, like impact to the healthcare professionals and impact to the life sciences companies?
Yeah, and attribution and impact of any campaign is so important. Like you and I have spoken about on many occasions, it's one of the things that I would love to be able to solve in my career in this industry outside the US. So just to tiptoe into the US very briefly, obviously in the US, you're able to attribute much more accurately about media dollars in to business outcome out. And what we're looking to do outside the US is being able to try and build either direct correlation where possible to whatever the business outcome is that's needed in that particular campaign. But if you can't do that due to the regulations in prescription tracking or the regulations in personal information, then what we're trying to do is work with partners to understand, are there any proxies that we can use to better understand what the impact of any media dollars in is, or play around with geo isolation or platform isolation for particular audiences if you can do that. But in order to do that, you need the buy-in from clients, and you need to be able to work with them on their first-party data, and you need to be able to understand from a client's perspective how they measure the business outcomes. And this is another trend, is media has sometimes been separate to what might be deemed an omni-channel marketing ecosystem, and it's kind of this unpopular sibling on the side, not invited to the party right at the start of strategy and brand development. But what's happening now, increasingly, which is brilliant, is that media is becoming part of that conversation right at the start, so that we can strategize together, we can move things forward, and we're actually connected into this ecosystem. And as a result, you get better outcomes. So you are able to link your media activity to your rep visits, you are able to link your media activity to your key events, and there's so many different ways in which you can do this, which ultimately then you start to see if media is driving some other action, which you're able to measure from an outcome perspective, and you can also start to play around with the value of media through another mechanism to a business outcome.
Your clients, partners, still talking more about clicks, or they have started talking about business outcomes? Because a lot of pharma messaging, right, when I see, as a physician, when I see, then I don't want to click, right? When I'm seeing a messaging from a drug, which I know, right? But it is acting as a reminder for me so that I can think about it when I see a patient relevant, but I will not click. So the messaging has evolved, but there is no click. Like, do you see such occasions, and like, how do you approach such a situation?
Yeah, and that is tricky, because sometimes it's an education point client perspective, if I'm really honest, and that they want to see their dollars coming in to some kind of halo metric coming out. whether that's clicks or site visits or time on site, whatever the understanding is. But what we have to do is we have to go back to modeling and for the marketing science behind advertising, whether that's reach, frequency. We have a really amazing team here that do media mix modeling and they do econometrics modeling. So understanding what is the impact of an ad coming to your eyes for half a second, whatever that is, and then you move on. So there's assumptions that we have to make in there, but people with far more data credentials than I go through that information in order to ascertain, yes, these, from a media perspective, these impressions were super valuable because, and this is how they've driven action further down the line. But it is sometimes a tricky conversation because you'll go to a client and say, no, honestly, this is driving decision making and it impacts an outcome further down the line. So again, part of our role as an agency and any media agency is to help a client understand.
Yeah, co-education I think is very important, which I think our episode also will play a little bit role in that education in making marketeers aware about how to consider, what to consider, right? I think in these scenarios. But you spoke a lot about data, I think in various sections. And in a market like US, I think there is the abundance of data in an organized manner available for targeting, messaging, attribution, measurement, etc. How has been your experience in the outside US markets, and how do you see that moving next?
Yeah, there's definitely been a really fast pace over the last 2 to 3 years in this space. Part of the driver of that, and we'll come on to the specifics of what they are, but part of the driver is that actually Pharma have got some amazing talent coming over from consumer side, where in the consumer space, everything you just spoken through is just a foundation on which they built outside the US. So this talent is coming into our industry, which is amazing in order to keep driving the partners forward, so agencies, media partners, but also those clients as well. So that's been a real driver for positive change. There is different levels of data available from the US to ex-US, but actually all pharma companies, all companies trying to communicate to healthcare professionals sit on a plethora of information and data. Part of the skill is helping those clients understand what they're sat on. Whether that's a really simple first party data, alignment, agreement, strategy, whatever we do with them. But more than that is what's the data that's coming through from their various assets, what's the data that's coming through from their various reps, what's the data that's coming through from various events. And really the facilitator of that is just really great tech and making sure that their CDP talks to the agency, planning tools, their CRM is plugged into their etc. There's so much technology that can be interwoven in order to create that integration. And actually, one trend that I would love to see more of is partners starting to move out of their typical boundaries. So by that I mean it might be that a social platform or a advertising platform start to really try and get to know excellently the CDP or get to know excellently about modular concept production, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to tie those two parts and the media ecosystem together. I know the doc area and you, Harshit, I really work hard on tying together the creative to the actual media planning, media choices and media optimization.
I think there are a lot of platforms, definitely. I think again, it's coming back to the role of the client, right? And it's about getting to that champion within a client organization who would lead the battle. And a lot of work is about identification of that champion will bring things together, because we are all sitting on a treasure which has been unearthed. So it's like a treasure hunt that we have to play with a partner. So what is one message that you would like to give to our young marketeers, to our viewers, when they are planning HCP media landscape for any out of US markets?
I think firstly, it's educate yourself or lean on your partners to educate. It's really difficult for pharma marketeers to be expert in everything. Often, pharma marketeers might come from a sales background with very little exposure to paid media, the intricacies of what's good, what's not good, and how to make fits together. So firstly, I would say either educate yourself, and there's a load of great content on LinkedIn training, YouTube, free courses online, but also just reach out to your partners because they would love to be able to train you on media generally. So I would say firstly, educate yourself. And then secondly, don't be intimidated by it as a medium. Again, it can be complex, can be confusing, but there's so much amazing creative work that can be done in the space. There's so much outcome that can come out of investing into this space. Media, as a line item on a budget sheet of a pharma company, is often one of the largest, and sometimes it isn't really given the attention that I think it should. So I'd encourage all young marketeers to really dive in and lean into this so that you can ensure that every dollar you're putting into media spends, you understand and you understand the output. I would, if the youngest generation of top marketers coming to doing that, Harshit, it would make for a really amazing industry.
Thank you so much, Richard, for joining the show and sharing your insights. I'm sure it's going to benefit our viewers immensely.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
What's been sucked out of our business, HJ, is time and money for experimentation and failure. And AI allows us to get back to that a bit. Quickly put in a prompt for an idea, maybe it sends you somewhere. Designers can explore looks very quickly versus taking a week to do things. And I do think it is an incredible tool for exploration and failure. And failure is such a part of creativity. You got to fail a lot. You got to experiment a lot to get to the perfect idea that is so nuanced, that is based in culture and based in things that are happening in a region or a country that are unique to that country.